Louisiana and Maine. Wait, what? Why the heck am I comparing these two states? What am I, crazy? Look, I'm not crazy. To explain why I am comparing these two states and these United States, I have a very special guest in this video.
Hey everybody, Poncha here, coming at you from 3,640 feet above sea level on Saddleback Junior Mountain in western Maine. You know, when Mr. B told me that he was comparing Louisiana and Maine for his next video, I told him that he was a madman, that it would never work, that he was risking everything, and for what? Some views on YouTube? It was insane and dangerous, and I refused to be a part of it. That is, until I started looking into these two states, and, well, turns out that they are pretty comparable. Maybe not geographically. Maine is mountainous, rugged, and rocky, while Louisiana is low, wet, and swampy. This is mid-city New Orleans, approximately 1 foot below sea level. What a dump. Hurricane come through here or something? Now, geographically, Louisiana and Maine are not very similar, but in terms of culture, and especially history, they really are. Both were settled by the French, and despite being later swallowed up by the Anglosphere, that French colonization had a significant impact on the culture. Both were settled by Quebecers, and in the late 17th century, the same family that settled Louisiana would actually fight the English for control of Maine during King William's War. So Louisiana and Maine might be a little bit more interconnected than they might at first appear.
Thank you, Poncha. See, I told you I wasn't crazy. Okay, I'm still crazy. Anyway, Poncha lives in Louisiana, but also has roots in New England, so yes, he was actually at both locations. Be sure to check out his channel because it's awesome. Okay, back to this not that strange after all comparison. Louisiana, aka the Bayou State.
Going down the bayou, going down the bayou.
Okay, that's enough. It's a good song, but let's not get a copyright strike from Disney now. And Maine, the Pine Tree State.
So how did you two meet? I was standing at the end of a wharf doing a bit of fishing.
And I was looking for a place to dock my boat.
So I helped clear a berth.
And I docked it.
Yeah, you docked it all right.
Those two dudes are definitely from Maine. Louisiana and Maine are both unique states with cultures unlike the rest of the country. But I'm not just comparing them because I didn't know what else to compare them to. I'm comparing them because they are indeed connected. More on that in a bit, but first, this video is sponsored in part by Newsreels, the smartest app in the market. It's an app that I've actually been using, so I'm excited that they're sponsoring this video. Basically, it's like TikTok, but instead of getting dances I don't know the moves to, I'm getting my daily dose of news simply by scrolling. I get a never-ending stream of short-form news videos tailored for me. I can choose from hundreds of topics and thousands of publications to tailor this news. It's a great way to consume more information in a jiffy instead of spending hours reading full articles. I personally like the feature that highlights local news. Most importantly, I can change the filters and topics anytime I want to gain new perspectives. Basically, it's like TikTok or Instagram, but for the news. Newsreels makes the news less boring. So try out Newsreels for yourself. Download the app for free by clicking on the link in the description of this video. Okay, let's first get into some history. Humans first settled what is now the state of Louisiana some 10,000 years ago, while they first settled what is now the state of Maine some 5,000 years ago. Jeez, so humans have been in Louisiana literally twice as long. Dang. Anyway, at the time of European arrival, major American Indian tribes in modern-day Louisiana included the Choctaw, Chitimacha, Atakapa, Natchez, Tunica, and Caddo. Major American Indian tribes in modern-day Maine included the Abenaki, Penobscot, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy. Europeans got to modern-day Maine first. Under the command of the Portuguese explorer Esteval Gomez, a Spanish Empire expedition first came across it in 1525. 3 years later, another Spanish Empire expedition, led by Panfilo de Narvaez, came to modern-day Louisiana. But it was the French who first settled both. Flash forward to 1604, and a French group led by Samuel de Champlain settled on St. Croix Island. No one lives on the tiny island today, by the way. They named the area Acadia. More and more French came to settle the area for the rest of the 1600s and into the 1700s, establishing strong relations with the local Indian tribes, mostly through Roman Catholic missionaries. However, at one point there was a civil war, and Acadia also found itself involved with King Philip's War. Hey, Atunche actually made a great video about that. It wasn't until 1682 that the French explorer René Robert Cavalier Sieur de la Salle, sorry I always butcher his name, gave Louisiana its name to honor the Sun King himself, French King Louis XIV. The French went ahead and claimed pretty much most of the central part of the continent and named this entire giant area the Colony of Louisiana. Its borders would change over the years. Meanwhile, the English were about to get all up in the French's business. English colonists found their way to settle in modern-day Maine as early as 1607, just 3 years after the French first settled. The English were the ones who gave Maine its name, establishing the province of Maine in 1622. One popular theory on why they called it, quote, Maine, was to simply distinguish it from the islands. It was the, quote, mainland. So sorry for your boring name, origin story, Maine. Anyway, by 1650, there were around 1,000 English settlers in modern-day Maine, but by that time, Maine was now part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. But more and more French settlers also came to Acadia, and increasingly there were some clashes at the border of what was now the province of Massachusetts Bay and Acadia. There were lots of little wars with most of the local American Indian tribes on the side of the French, but long story short, the British captured Port Royal, the Acadian capital, in 1710. However, after that, even though the British now controlled all of Acadia, the Acadians generally refused to swear allegiance to the British crown. In the following decades, some of them continued to resist British rule. Meanwhile, more and more French settlers were coming to Louisiana. But it wasn't just the French. German immigrants also settled there. African slaves were forced to come there. And then a big war. The French and Indian War was a battle for the entire continent, with all the British American colonies against all the French American colonies and their American Indian allies. During the war, the British kicked thousands of Acadians out of the modern-day Canadian maritime provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. Oh, and yes, also modern-day Maine. Yeah, it was understandable since many Acadians were a military threat during the war. Thousands of Acadians died in their struggle to stay. By the time the British won the war, the British Governor Charles Lawrence and the Nova Scotia Council had ordered nearly all Acadians expelled. Many ended up in Louisiana, which now belonged to Spain. Today, most people don't realize that some of these Acadians stuck around the Maritimes and future Maine. And while the Acadians who ended up in Louisiana are today often referred to as Cajuns, those Acadians who remained up there are also called Cajuns. That's confusing. So anyway, yeah, this is mainly why I'm making this video. After the French and Indian War, Louisiana as a Spanish colony continued to grow. The Spanish had less strict laws on non-Europeans living there, so free blacks saw more rights. Actually, under Spanish rule in Louisiana, it became sort of this amazing melting pot where you saw a mix of French, Spanish, English, American Indian, African, German, Italian, and other ethnic groups. In the early 1800s, thousands of refugees arrived in New Orleans during the Haitian Revolution, and all these different ethnic groups often intermarried. In 1800, France got Louisiana back. But then Napoleon sold it to the United States for really cheap, approximately $18 per square mile. Dang! Meanwhile, modern-day Maine was still part of Massachusetts when the United States became a country after the American Revolution. But the folks who lived up there often culturally felt disconnected to the rest of Massachusetts. I mean, they were also literally disconnected, but I digress. Many residents there took up a 35-year campaign for statehood. It kind of worked out for them when Missouri wanted to become a state. In 1820, under the Missouri Compromise, Missouri became a slave state and Maine became a free state to keep the balance between free and slave states. By that time, Maine was generally very against slavery and had become a hub of the growing abolitionist movement. However, down in Louisiana, slavery had continued to be legal. Louisiana became a state 8 years before Maine did, and yes, as a slave state. The rest of the Louisiana Purchase, by the way, would eventually be turned into several other states. It was a big freaking area, after all. Oh, did you know that Maine got itself involved with a war with British America? Yep, the Aroostook War, which actually saw little violence at all, was basically a border dispute between lumbermen from New Brunswick and Maine. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty ended the dispute. By the 1840s, Louisiana was pretty wealthy due to slave labor, but just 2 decades later, slavery would end after the American Civil War. As you probably already know, Louisiana fought on the Confederate side, Maine fought on the Union side. After the Civil War ended, Louisiana's economy suffered, and for the rest of the 1800s and into the 1900s, its government heavily discriminated against African Americans through Jim Crow laws, as seen by the Separate Car Act and the famous Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson. Up in Maine, logging had been big, but quickly, tourists were realizing that Maine was an excellent place to escape to during the summer heat. Maine was industrial before Louisiana. In fact, industry was actually on the decline there when it was finally going up in Louisiana. During the Great Depression, the famous or infamous Governor Huey Long was an influential leader in Louisiana. Later, Louisiana was also a hot spot during the Civil Rights Movement. Today, Louisiana is more urban than it's ever been, but Maine, unlike most of the rest of the country, is becoming more rural. It's actually the most rural state in the country. Still, both have lots of outdoor recreational opportunities, especially with fishing and boating in Louisiana and fishing, hiking, and hunting in Maine. Both have lots of tourists every year. But while tourism is big in both, the 3 biggest industries in both are healthcare, retail, and education. Both are coastal, with Louisiana bordering the Gulf of Mexico and Maine bordering the Atlantic Ocean. Both have thousands of islands, although many of Louisiana's barrier islands are starting to disappear due to climate change. The largest cities in both, New Orleans and Louisiana, and Portland and Maine, heavily influence the rest of their states. Almost 1 in 3 Maine residents live in the Portland metropolitan area, while almost 1 in 4 Louisiana residents live in the New Orleans metropolitan area. Almost as many people live in the New Orleans metro as all of the state of Maine, by the way. Residents of both states have distinct accents and dialects. The Maine accent, spoken mainly in the down east and mid-coast regions along the coast, is known for dropping the R at the end of the word, stretching out words, or just separating vowels within a word. There's me and Bahaba. The Louisiana accent and dialect is kind of a split between Cajun English in New Orleans and most of southern Louisiana, and the more broader Southern American English accent in the rest of the state. Cajun English goes back to the Cajuns I previously told you about back when they settled French Louisiana. Combine that with all the other ethnic groups that settled there later, and an entirely new culture developed. The people who descended from the residents of colonial Louisiana before it joined the United States, tracing their ancestry mostly to African, French, Spanish, and Native American origin, are known as Louisiana Creoles. The Creole influence is so strong and the dialect so unique that outside folks going down to southern Louisiana sometimes have no clue clue what the locals are talking about. There's also Cajun French, but that is quickly becoming an endangered language. Okay, I guess we can now get more into differences between the two states. First of all, Louisiana is a southern state. Maine is all Yankee, baby. In New England, Louisiana is so far south that it's in the deep south. Maine is so far north that it's the northernmost state on the East Coast. Louisiana has more than 3 times as many people. Yeah, not many folks live up in Maine. It's actually the 10th least populated state in the country. Its capital city, Augusta, has a population of less than 20,000. Louisiana is more diverse, with a higher percentage of residents who were born in a foreign country. More than a third of its population identifies as African American. Most Maine residents trace their ancestry back to Europe. The median age is much higher in Maine. In fact, Maine has the highest median age of any state in the entire country. A bunch of old fogies live there, apparently. I'm kidding. Louisiana residents are generally much more religious. For those who are religious in both states, Christianity is the biggest religion within that group. Evangelical Protestant and Roman Catholic are the 2 biggest Christian groups in Louisiana, while mainline Protestant and Roman Catholic are the 2 biggest Christian groups in Maine. While Maine is one of the least religious states in the country, much of Louisiana is in the Bible Belt, a region of the country where Protestant fundamentalism is widely practiced. Although New Orleans definitely doesn't seem like Bible Belt material. It's more famous for its nightlife and as a party city with lots of adult entertainment establishments, if you know what I mean. While New Orleans deserves a video on its own, I will say in this video that it is a world-famous city known for its unique mix of cultures and dialects. It's where jazz originated, for crying out loud. And it's the home of the most famous Mardi Gras celebration in the world. In case you don't know what Mardi Gras is, it's the tradition of celebrating food and fun just before the 40 days of Lent, a Roman Catholic time of prayer and sacrifice. Historically, Mardi Gras has actually been celebrated in Louisiana as early as the 1600s. Louisiana is bigger in land area. The cost of living is much higher in Maine. But to try to make up for that, Maine does have a higher minimum wage. According to Forbes magazine, Maine is a better state for business. This is surprising though, since overall, it has some of the highest taxes in the country. Yep, Louisiana residents pay much less in taxes. Despite this, over the last couple of years, Maine's population has increased, but Louisiana's population has decreased. Perhaps one reason why is crime. Louisiana and Maine are practically opposites when it comes to violent crime. Year after year, Maine is consistently one of the safest states in the country, while Louisiana is one of the least safe. It currently has the 5th highest violent crime rate in the country. The climates are quite different, I'd say. First of all, Louisiana has a humid subtropical climate, and Maine has mostly a humid continental climate. But it gets way colder in Maine and way hotter in Louisiana, okay? Both do get a lot of precipitation, but obviously Maine gets lots of snow, and Louisiana rarely gets any ever. Even in northern Louisiana, winters are mild, and it doesn't get below freezing more than 35 days a year. Sadly, Louisiana is among the states that will experience the absolute worst effects of climate change in the coming decades. This means rising seas, retreating shores, a bunch of fish dying off, increased flooding, and more severe tropical storms and hurricanes, which we've already seen in recent years. Speaking of hurricanes, while Louisiana residents have to worry about them every year, hurricanes rarely hit Maine, since they usually lose steam by the time they reach that far north. That said, Maine does get nor'easters, which are basically a special type of hurricane that gets stronger from cold air. So Maine residents have to worry about blizzards, yes. Maine is much more rugged. Most of it has mountains and stuff. The Appalachian Mountains, to be specific, some of these mountains go right up to the ocean. Louisiana, meanwhile, has no mountains. Oh geez, really? Driscoll Mountain? Is that all you got? An elevation of 535 feet. Are you serious? Are we really doing this? Okay, so Louisiana may have a mountain or two or three, but most of it consists of flat lowlands. It's coastal plains, baby. Louisiana has swamps and marshes, and yes, lots of alligators. More than any other state, apparently. Oh, and Louisiana has bayous.
Going down the bayou, taking you home.
Again, it's a good song, but Disney can be ruthless. Much of Louisiana was formed from sediment washed down from the Mississippi River. Speaking of the Mississippi River, Louisiana is where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico, and historically it has been a very important port. Maine residents tend to be more left-leaning than Louisiana residents. You definitely see this with presidential elections. Maine hasn't gone completely for the Republican Party candidate since the presidential election of 1988, while Louisiana hasn't gone for the Democratic Party candidate since 1996. That said, Maine is one of only 2 states that splits up its electoral votes, which I think is pretty cool. It's called the Congressional District Method since it awards 2 electoral votes to the state popular vote winner and divides up the rest to the popular vote winner in each of its 2 congressional districts. This led to a split electoral vote there in both 2016 and 2020. Maine's 2nd congressional district, which makes up 80% of the state's total land area, is the 2nd most rural district in the country, and yep, it went for Trump in both 2016 and 2020. Indeed, most of Maine's population lives in this general area. Up north and east, you got a lot of moose, but not many people. Louisiana's population is more spread out, but most of its residents definitely live down here in either Baton Rouge, the capital, or New Orleans, its biggest city. The 2 cities are about an hour and 20 minutes drive from each other. Louisiana has a much higher poverty rate. In fact, the only state in the country with a higher poverty rate than Louisiana is Mississippi. The median household income is also higher in Maine. Many more Maine residents have college degrees. According to Wallet Hub, Maine has much better public schools. Louisiana doesn't have counties like Maine and most of the rest of the states in the country. It has parishes. Maine has a national park. Louisiana doesn't. Oh yeah? Well, Louisiana has professional sports teams. Maine doesn't. Marijuana is completely legal in Maine. Only medical marijuana is legal in Louisiana, although having a small amount of it has been decriminalized there. About 90% of Maine is forested. That's more than any other state. Britney Spears is from Louisiana. But Stephen King is from Maine, and most of his books are set in Maine. Oh, and he actually lives there. The film industry in Louisiana has dramatically grown over the past 2 decades. Call it Hollywood on the Bayou. Maine is the easternmost state in the country where people actually live. It also shares a 611-mile border with Canada. Specifically, Maine borders the provinces of Quebec and New Brunswick. There are 24 land border crossings between Maine and Canada. That all said, Maine is the only state in the United States that shares its border with only one other state. Louisiana has the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, the longest continuous bridge over water in the entire world. It crosses, you guessed it, Lake Pontchartrain. Around 90% of the country's lobster supply is caught off the coast of Maine. Oh yeah? Well, Louisiana is the leading producer of crawfish. Let's see, what else? Louisiana has 5 syllables, tied for the most of any state. Maine has 1 syllable, the only state in the country that has only 1 syllable. Okay, we're talking about syllables. It's time to end it. In conclusion, the main thing these 2 states have in common are the Acadians. Those descendants of the French who lived up here. And while that French culture is more easily seen today in Louisiana, it's still there in Maine, and as many as 3% of its population still speak French at home. And yeah, while this shared French heritage from 2 very different states is the main reason why I chose to compare them for this series, it's also worth pointing out that both states are so unique that they are really difficult to compare to any other state anyway. So there you have it. Louisiana and Maine, the lovable oddball states. A special thanks to Atun Shea for filming in his home state of Louisiana, then driving all the way up to Maine just for this video to help me out. I appreciate that, buddy. It's not like he was gonna drive up there anyway to spend some time with family. But yeah, check out Atun Shea's channel if you haven't already, by golly. It features some great history content, especially some great Louisiana history content. So which is better, Louisiana or Maine? Let me know in the comments. I always love the suggestions for other states to compare as well. And finally, here's my monthly shout out to all my Patreon supporters who donate at least 15 bucks or more each month to my channel, starting with my $20 a month supporters. And I apologize in advance for mispronouncing names. Alexander Major, Alicia Solberg, Andrew B., Anthony Beckett, Austin Ciros, Brady Bardwell, Dr. Paul J. Lilly, Elijah Ellis, Kyle Fassbinder, Matt Standish, Nick Everett, Pat Iapika, Sean Connett, Thomas, Will Scruggs, and William Roush. At the $15 Dwight Eisenhower level, Andrew Snyder, Brian Layton, Christian Ojeda, Grant Hughes, Ian Driscoll, Elon Capone, Jack L., Jack Richardson, Jacob Birnbaum, Joel Serrano Luzada, John Johnson, Justin Holt, Kit Walker, Lee Fortier, Naderade, Osbers Gaming, who just released a great Mr. Beat Out of Context video, by the way, on his channel, Robert Reichel, Samuel Striz, Thomas Oppenheim, Victor Martinez, Waterfort, Werner69, and Zachary F. Parker. Thanks also to my PayPal supporters, and thank you for watching.